Ragini, is the manosphere really the problem, or is it a symptom of something deeper going wrong in our culture?
Thanks for the question. I think I'd say it's definitely a symptom, but then the question comes back to, well, what actually is the manosphere? Because I feel like what we call the manosphere is really the most extreme elements, but the actual manosphere is much bigger than that. And I was looking at something the other day, and it was like, well, the manosphere has been around a long time, and actually, most of the original conversations within the manosphere was about male empowerment. And even in the space that we call the manosphere today, 80 to 90% of it is male boy empowerment. And then there's obviously the 10% that's pretty out there and pretty misogynistic. And that's what gets tagged as the manosphere. So I think, by putting focus on the most extreme elements, we're reinforcing it. So, and going back to your original question, yes, it's absolutely a symptom of where we are as a society. And as I mentioned to you before, Penny, I'm a mother of 3 boys, and I've seen firsthand what happens when a society becomes feminized. The majority of their teachers are female. And one day, one of the boys came home and was basically saying, well, the teacher told me about, women being oppressed and just this narrative that you hear from feminists. And I was like, why is that being talked about with a 14-year-old boy, and then it had me really question, how many boys are hearing this? And I'm sure the teachers who spouted think that they're doing the right thing. They're trying to lift women up, and they're trying to raise boys and men who are aware about the plight of women. But I'm like, that's not what they need to hear, because that's not the world that they've come from. Boys are boys. So why can't we start having a conversation which is really about a healthy masculine? Because we've had decades of toxic masculinity, and they're constantly told that there's something wrong with them. And then I see, even with my younger son, who's 9, he goes to school and they're told to sit down. They're told to be quiet. We don't want swings in the school because you might hurt yourself. So we're in this really safety culture. 95% of the staff are female. So I just think there's something going on. There's an undercurrent here that we're not actually talking about. And then we're talking about the effects like the manosphere and radicalized boys. But actually, that's not the majority of the experience within the manosphere that most boys have. It's actually empowerment to a world that's actually telling them that they're a problem.
Yeah, and to that point, actually, the manosphere, as I used to understand it, was influencers that I like, who are podcasters such as Chris Williamson, who explore, modern. He's very in touch with his feminine side, but also very interested in self-improvement. And that's a really great thing. I think Jordan Peterson was one of the earlier ones who would talk about, make your bed, present yourself well, and try to talk about positive masculinity. And then I noticed he started getting really demonized as well. And it seems there's been a vacuum created, and we've got to take some responsibility for why men and boys are looking to these other people. And it's fine to have role models, like I said, but when 95% of their teachers are female, and you're in Australia, is that right, Ragini? Yeah.
Yeah, I
And
am, yeah.
I'm in the UK. It's probably very similar split here. We've seen a mass deindustrialization in the UK as well. I'm not so sure about Australia because there's still a lot of mining and things, isn't there,
Yeah.
in Australia?
But for the manufacturing sector, it has declined significantly. So,
Right,
yeah.
yeah. And again, where are men to turn, boys and men, for these strong positive role models that doesn't include, domination, that masculinity isn't necessarily about that. So the Louis Theroux documentary that is floating around again, that's brought this conversation back up. You've seen bits of it. I did watch it in preparation for this conversation. And as we said, I found myself agreeing with much of what the boys were saying. There were some really valid points in there. Now, when I looked further into this, there's the red pill culture, which I believe is a Matrix reference to just seeing the world as it really is. And then I
Yeah.
also discovered something called the black pill culture. And this was a more hopeless view of the manosphere, of the world as it is. I wasn't familiar with this. And then you were going into the incel territory. Actually, the things that we're talking about here, it's a really small proportion, isn't it? That is this real,
Yeah.
I hate the word toxic masculinity, but this real core of misogyny sits within a tiny part. So what do you think our message should be to boys about looking at these types of influences?
Well, I mean, I think let's try and, if they had more role models, if we listed up, more of the sensible voices, unfortunately, and I think it was said in the documentary, I think one of the boys said, I do it because I want to get likes. So he'll just be more and more radical in what he says to get likes. Now, that's not a boy thing. You see what's happening on social media. You're seeing boys and girls doing more and more extreme things. I think it's a generational culture. So it's not just a boy thing. And so people will say stuff to get likes, stuff to get followers, because what it does is ultimately hooking into people's pains and wounds. They suddenly see that someone's saying something that resonates with a negative experience that they've had. And so you get hooked in, you get drawn into kind of this sphere. But I don't think it's sex specific. I think there's stem cells as well, where, as you said, this black pill space where, the conversations are not rooted in hope. They're rooted in hatred of the other sex or just kind of a futility about life. And so I think there's a real risk when we keep elevating those things as if that was the norm.
Mm.
It's not the norm. Where are the normal voices? And I see on social media, you trying to put a normal post out there that is not as divisive just doesn't get the traction.
Yeah,
So then it comes back down to human nature. We love the more provocative stuff. You know,
yeah,
it's not just people of a certain generation. We all do. We're drawn to it. So what is it? I mean, you look at the news. The news is more and more radical. It's
yeah.
so detached from everyday reality because people are somehow just addicted to it. So I think there's a fundamental problem with society, and for us to go, actually, that's not the world.
Yeah.
There are a few extreme voices. So I don't know how we do that, but I think part of it is trying to, in a small way, each and every one of us going, let's try and focus on the more sensible voices out there. Even if we don't agree with them, let's hear out what they have to say and because the more and more that I find when I talk to people who I disagree with, there's similar core values there. It's just expressed in different ways. We've just forgotten how to do that.
And that's really interesting that you say that. A couple of points you made, but one was about speaking to people we disagree with. It's so important. I have some of my best conversations with people I fundamentally disagree with. I try to find that commonality, but I try to understand where they come from. Now, one of the things that really brought forward this thought in my mind was the Louis Theroux documentary. It is this blurring of language. So the example being Harrison, one of the guys, was being openly, really badly homophobic to the point he said if his son was gay, he would disown him. I mean, to me, that is the epitome of homophobia. You can't get more of a pure definition than that. When he was challenged on it, he said, "Well, that's not homophobia." It was like he genuinely didn't understand. He understood that what he was saying was click-worthy. There was a word they kept using about the rage bait. He understood that he had to be really extreme to get the views, and he was absolutely working that algorithm. But the more he was challenged on it. Now, interestingly, his mother appeared on the show as well. And he even said, "My mother would kill me if she heard me talking like this about gay people, about being really misogynistic," and he was. And then it cut to a scene later where his mother was there, and it was clear his mother was a rather domineering character. And I wondered whether there was something about this. He grew up without a father. His mother obviously had to give him a firm hand, having a son. And I thought, there's something going. Is he rebelling against his mother here? What's that
Yeah.
about, you know?
Well, I mean, when you dig through the deeper layers of anyone's psyche, there's all sorts of reasons, right? But I think the point about fatherless homes being a big thing right now is something that doesn't really get talked about, and the impact of that. And then you look at the family court system and how males are disadvantaged in that system.
Yeah.
And so we've got a system that incentivizes. Well, firstly, you've got a system that, where people don't understand what it is to endure through relationships. We divorce easier. Approximately 70% of divorces are initiated by women, because I think partly we're in this culture where it's all about freedom and fun and virility, and that we don't want to go through the tough times because we don't understand that sometimes those tough times actually make us. They actually make the relationship, And so you've got lots of homes that are breaking up, and you've got children effectively raised by the state or a single mum, and there's got to be consequences to that. So
Yeah. The relationship thing, again, is very interesting. When I was younger, I'm not sure how old you are, Ragini. I'm 52, so I was Gen X, and you are Gen X, aren't you?
yeah,
And it was all about independence. You can have it all. You can have your career. You can put off having children. You can do whatever you want. And it's about not tolerating anything and happiness without defining what happiness was. Selling
yeah,
women a lie that they could absolutely just get their career on track because there was loads of time to have kids, and it turned out there wasn't. I see women with toddlers, and they are hurtling into their menopause, and they are really struggling because nobody told them that if you have a child late 30s, early 40s, you're going to probably hit your menopause as well. And I feel like women have been lied to, let's just say, and that has led to the breakup of families because now we have these portfolio careers. So you do not have a job for life. There isn't actually a massive rush anymore to get where you're going to be in your career, then take your break, because half the time women are so exhausted because they're doing all of it. It's not you can do one or the other. And then men come into these relationships where the woman wants a family, and there's this myth now about can a man provide for a woman, or is that sexist? But then the consequences is a woman's going to have to work and raise a family because that's the way it tends to go. So
yeah.
there's another question around how women have been lied to. Are we just angry now that we've realised we can't have it all? And men are feeling really lost, they're like little satellites around us and don't know how to land. They don't know where to come in from.
Yeah. I mean, I could talk to you forever about that because that's been partly my own journey as well. I woke up to this myth of having it all. Most of my 20s, 30s was so much of your value was attached to your job title, being able to travel, how much you earned, and I completely fell for it, And so, yes, I'm 50 now, perimenopausal. I've got a 9-year-old. I'm living what you're talking about. And unfortunately, and I'm trying, and that's why I talk about this more, because I think we need to balance the conversation. We can't just pretend it's not happening. We can't pretend we can have it all. And we talk about emotional labor, like this is all these terminologies. And I'm like, yes, your children do want you. Children want nurturing. That's what they need early on. It's just life. It's not where there's a lot of shaming, oh, men aren't doing enough. But I'm just like, I just feel like it really takes us backwards. Our generation actually tried to erase sex differences to an extent.
Yeah.
Men and women can do anything. Women can do it all. Like we can lead if we led the world. There's all these phrases that came out of that generation. And I think, I'm not saying that it's all bad because, we don't want to go back to being the 1950s housewife, but there wasn't a balanced conversation and a full picture of what it meant. And now now I'm realizing children do need, you see the rise in children with attention deficit, this, that. And I'm like, attention deficit is a deficit of attention. We're not giving children the attention that they need. We're not able to do that because we're so busy trying to be it all in the world. And I think that plays out in a certain way with girls and that plays out in a certain way with boys. And given that there's a lot more fatherless homes, then I would say that the impact on boys is quite significant. And then going back to the fact that, again, they're moving into a feminized world, their teachers are all female. Where are the male role models? So they have to seek them elsewhere, which is really sad because and I think, as you were saying, with the boy who was trying to please his mother, they don't really know what they're saying. They're still relatively young men and they're just talking nonsense. They really don't have the experience of life, right?
Yeah.
And they're just talking nonsense and it's appealing to a young, uninitiated mind. So I think that's the challenge is we need more wiser voices out there. And unfortunately, the most unhinged young voices are getting traction.
Yeah. And again, the algorithm's got a lot to answer to for that. Like you said, to put a measured, interesting post out, it usually just drops into the ocean, doesn't it? And even your followers will not see it. The amount of people who say, "Oh, did you see my post about whatever?" And I follow them, I interact with them, but I don't see their posts, and particularly around gender critical stuff as well. And
Yeah.
to your point about the sex, and we were told that there wasn't a difference between sexes, instead of celebrating the differences that we have, we are equal, of course we are, in lots of ways, but we don't do things in the same way. We have different skills, and that's been demonized. Now, another point that I heard a couple of these guys on the documentary, and I hear a lot, Andrew Tate, is about they claim to love women. Now, I find this fascinating. I believe in the feminine divine. Female sexuality is incredibly powerful, and I think does answer to a lot of the repressive religions that try and keep women down, Islam being one of them. Again, it just looks like they're terrified of women and our power. So when these men are saying that they love women and they want to provide for them and allow them the space to be mothers, but I noted one of the guys, I can't remember his name, his business was like Red Steel. He was an American guy with red hair. He wouldn't marry his partner, and she'd had a job. And she was like saying, "I'm really happy." And they were talking about this one-way monogamy. So a couple of them mentioned it, where they were saying, well, the women were almost conditioned to go, "At least he's not lying to me," and pack his condoms. And then I think, do you actually think she is being faithful to you? Like, I doubt she is, but maybe she is. And it was this a definite power play that I will provide for the woman. I love her. I want her to have the space to be a mother. But it wasn't. It was about control and loss. And actually, that guy, when Louis digged around a little bit, he'd grown up with a really unstable family life. His mother had burnt 2 of their trailer homes to the ground for the insurance. There was violence with the man in his life. They were poor. You know, and he'd made a lot of money, and he was one of Andrew Tate's disciples. And again, on the surface, lots of things you could see. I'm sure he meant well. I'm sure he did. But watching the woman parrot back about this one-way monogamy, it led me to question as well, why are women falling into this stereotype? So Harrison, the other guy, he was really being rude about OnlyFans stuff. But yeah, he was promoting these girls, and they were like vapid dolls. That's how they came across, dressed up as female empowerment, and selling yourself is not female empowerment. So we've got these girls now who are falling for this image of womanhood. And I found
Yeah.
it really sad. Where is that coming from?
Yeah. I think it's sad. I don't think, I think there's definitely a force out there that where womanhood is being reduced, there's a superficial image of what it is to be a woman. And those boys, those men, they're not actually men, they're just boys who need growing up to do. They don't know what a woman is. And as you said, they probably haven't had that experience because their parents or their mother was so traumatized, you know? So it's what you're actually looking at, and this is what fascinates me, is actually a cycle of trauma. They think they're transcending their trauma through superficial means, but when you transcend your trauma, you actually become wiser. You have something to give back to society in a really wholesome way, and that's not what they're doing. So that's what tells me that it's not a manosphere, it's a boyosphere. They're just effectively, uninitiated men, and they don't know what women are. And I agree with you. Women don't know, girls don't know what it is to be a woman, And so there's a lot of like, we're parading around trying to be like men. But I'm like, we have to acknowledge that we're different. Yes, equal, but completely different. Our biology makes us different. Our endocrine systems or hormones makes us different. We're different, and different in a beautiful way. It's a different in a very complementary way,
Yeah.
And I agree, certain cultures or certain parts of cultures fear women, fear the power that women have, because we're more relationally motivated by relationship. Men are more motivated by doing things in the world, and women are more motivated by relationship. And if women's empowerment was actually about owning what it is to actually be a woman, owning our unique difference. But when you stop talking about differences and you start pretending that we're exactly like men and can do what they can do, and that's put up as the pinnacle, then so much is lost. Because I'm hearing from so many women that, they get to 50 and they didn't have the children, don't have the relationship, but the deep pain that comes with that. Because, you know that you're not going to be on your deathbed wishing that you got another promotion.
Yeah.
That's not what makes life. It's how, and I'm not saying we're all meant to be married or we're all meant to have children, but there is a real beauty in that. And that's lost in the world right now. So I think, yes to female power, but we have to actually understand what that means. It's not us getting dressed up in a suit, going to work, being the boss babe. That's not female power.
No. Yeah, it isn't. And again, I think our generation, we were sold the shoulder pads and we had Maggie Thatcher and Madonna and all of that and these tremendous role models, if you like. But what you are observing now is a different mask that these girls are wearing. It's the false boobs. It's the generic looking face. I think the guys in the manosphere, I love the boyosphere. They call it like looks maxing, where you see younger people having plastic surgery, their teeth veneered, all of these things. The beauty that you see in differences in faces is disappearing, where everybody looks the same. And it's almost the pornification of these men. It's like the girls are stepping into the porn doll because they think, so I think, so it leads me to like, when women work together, we are absolutely incredible. Like we're unstoppable. When I look at we're called Turf Island, of course, in the UK, because there was a real seam of women who were not prepared to accept that you can change sex and that because a man would demand to be in a woman's space, that woman, her boundaries were just instantly trampled on, not respected. And I think there's a very strong link between that and the general misogyny we see in society now. If you've got a movement that would reduce woman to woman face, that we are just tits, arse and lipstick, and that, oh, I'm a woman now. It's like, that is not what being a woman is. And to believe that that's true, and the amount of women who push back and criticize women for standing their ground. And it comes back to the language thing again, Ragini, because I've been called a Nazi, I think, a bigot for not wanting men in female toilets. I mean, it's a bit of a leap. These words, genocide, transphobia, are just thrown around. Another one, interestingly, is Zionist. So I spoke to a couple of people recently about the amount of anti-Semitism we're seeing and talking about what Zionism is. And I said to somebody like, I'm a Zionist. Of course, I believe the Jews should have a homeland. Like, why wouldn't I? It applies to a lot of cultures. And a really intelligent middle-aged woman just said, I'm so glad you said that because I don't know what Zionist means. Been meaning to Google it. And and she is a smart woman, smart woman. And I thought, wow, we are taking definitions of words from TikTok and social media. And if we can't speak our language, and it comes back to the trans debate, if you can't define what a woman is, then you can't talk about what we need as women and what men are. That's where women's lines have been massively blurred.
Yeah. Like, I think people, I get called bigot or whatever. And I just think, exactly, if you can't name what a woman is, how do you actually get to expand that definition and actually understand the depth of womanhood? If it is just a woman face or anyone can, if it just becomes an identity, just think it's so ridiculous. As I've looked into the trans stuff, you see this kind of rapid transition that's happening at the moment it's significantly affecting girls.
Yeah.
It's significantly affecting girls. Therefore there's a much higher rate of girls detransitioning who have then had the surgeries or the medications. And
Yeah.
so I'm like, where are the women standing up for these girls? Because I didn't know much about this topic until I looked at a video of a detransitioner, and I
Oh,
saw what was happening, and it broke my heart. I was like,
yeah.
how can women sit there and allow this to happen and allow girls to think that they can change their body and somehow that's going to make them happy? And unfortunately, we live in a society where these wise voices, we're not even gender critical, we're sex realists.
Yeah,
Right?
that's the
You
term.
know?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like, we matter, our voices matter. There's a significant consequence to society when you erode sex differences. I can't be a horse, I can't be a carrot. There are some real truths in the world.
Yeah.
So I just think that, yeah, we've got to hold our ground, because I think it's actually, I believe the numbers of people identifying is slowly starting to drop now, but
Yeah.
which is a good thing. But I think the fact that now you're going to have generations, a couple of generations of young
Gosh.
women who've transitioned. I can't imagine what it'd be like if I grew up as a tomboy. You know,
Yeah, me too.
I grew up insecure. Imagine if this nonsense was around then, and how. And we're talking about those boys. You don't know what the world is. You haven't had real problems to work through. And if someone comes up and gives you snake oil to solve your problems and says that's suddenly going to solve it, then we've got a real issue, because, most problems you go through in life and you come out the other end wiser, more grown up. And if suddenly we say that we've got a simple solution to those problems, then what we've got is a generation of stunted people. There's stunted boys and girls who haven't fucking
It's
grown up.
Yeah, it's so heartbreaking. And I think as well, the rise in women attempting to transition, I don't even like to use that word because you can't transition, but in their minds is just a physical manifestation of some trauma that is going on. When we
Yeah.
see so many women and girls accepting this really narrow, commoditized version of womanhood, you can see why women want to opt out of it. How hard puberty is when your body starts changing and everything's different. It can be really traumatic. And so I understand, but to see a girl with a mastectomy and the skin missing from her arm and her thigh, and with this flaccid piece of, it's such a lie to be told to mutilate anybody's body, even boys. The boy transitioners. My heart breaks for them because they don't have their penis anymore. So they are really, really stuck. Whereas a lot of
Yeah.
women obviously do keep their sex organs. Many of them going into menopause in their 20s. And
I
again,
know.
what a thing to do to girls. It's so
Yeah.
unbelievably heartbreaking. But you can see why women are trying to opt out of this version of womanhood. There's definitely social media, and again, I don't like to demonize social media. Did you see this week that Meta and Google in the US have been found guilty of making addictive content?
No, I didn't see that.
Oh, it's in California. It was yesterday.
Well,
Yeah.
we'd have thought you need a court case for that.
Exactly. And it's interesting. So it's a 20-odd-year-old woman who's brought this case and said that basically it's ruined her life being addicted to social media. Now, what this will mean for the algorithms, for those companies, for court cases, I mean, it's quite interesting to watch. But a really good point, because again, the language blurring, a lot of it does come from TikTok. I hear people saying, well, I just get my news from TikTok. I'm like, oh, yeah. And
Yeah.
it's not really news, though. It's like,
I want to verify that.
yeah, go to the source on it. Another thing about deplatforming these guys, I watched my first real interaction with Andrew Tate was last year, and it was Bonnie Blue. Are you familiar with Bonnie Blue, the
Yes, I am. Yeah.
trans lady? And she's a rather fascinating character. I don't know if you've looked into her much. We could do one on that, actually, because she's an unusual. I was looking for trauma in her, like I was sure it was there because I think she couldn't have children. But you cannot argue with that woman's logic when you hear her. I've seen quite a few interviews with her, and she seems fine. I can't believe I'm saying it. Anyway, she did an interview with Andrew Tate. So I watched it because I was following content about her. And as I watched this hour-long, long-form chat, I agreed with a lot of stuff Andrew Tate was saying, but what I found him was unintentionally quite funny. I found him quite curious. I found him very contradictory. He seemed
No.
to me to be gay as well, or certainly bisexual. Like, seeing he has all his, his chicks on the boat, but he's on his laptop and stuff. I felt like, I don't think my husband would be looking at his laptop if I was strutting around on a yacht with him in a bikini. I don't think, and he'd be interested in work. And I just found it really peculiar. He seemed to be a bit in awe of Penny Blue as well. I didn't know whether that's because she'd created a business empire and really monetized well. It was fascinating. And I thought, I don't have boys. I'm a stepmom. And I thought,
Yeah.
if I was watching that with my children, male or female, we would be kind of laughing. We'd be diffusing him. Have we
Yeah.
made these men more interesting and elusive by making them, demonizing them? Are we making them more attractive to these boys, do you think?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's the age-old thing, what you resist persists, right? And so and that's the phenomenon that we're seeing because and I mean, there's a real irony. He's not married, and yet the way he talks about women, I'm just like, these people don't actually walk the talk. So I don't know how anyone actually takes them seriously. I can understand to a certain demographic, they can be appealing, but yeah, I think it's what happens to society when people are looking outside of themselves for value, where they're not attached to something deeper within themselves about what's true and what's real, And I think that's what's really lost. We've got generations of kids who probably haven't had the love and affection and nurturing that they've needed, who haven't been taught how to ground in their own body to be embodied, who've actually, with the world of social media, like you look outside there for approval, that's why we've become so much more performative and so much more superficial. I can't imagine in our generation that we had the magazines and whatever else, and they were bad enough. But now to have it in your face all the time where you've got this curated images of girls looking perfect, I can't imagine what that would do to a psyche.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and similarly, it's the same for boys. I can't imagine what it would do to them. So yeah, and I don't want to get onto social media, but I just think it's like, how do we raise children that are more wholesome, more grounded, that are impervious to a lot of what's going on in the world?
Yeah.
And I think that the invitation right now is that we've got to hold our kids closer. We've got to really be there for them. And from my own personal experience, I had to stop working the same way that I was working before. And that was a real shock for me, because it was like so much of my value and worth was tied into a paycheck, was tied into a job title. And I had to give that up. And that was really hard to let go, but I wouldn't change that, because being a mother is so much more than what any of those jobs gave me. And that doesn't mean I don't want to contribute to the world in a meaningful way, but I've had to be realistic as well about what is actually what I need to give at home versus what I can give in the world.
And again, this regressive terminology around sex-based roles, as if you being a good mum, and being there for your children. It was interesting what you said earlier about attention deficit disorder, because there is an epidemic of it. And I wonder, where has it come from? And actually, I think you've hit the nail on the head there. Like, the way we're interacting with our children, even our kids now, they don't live near us, so we don't see them as much. But even when they were coming up fortnightly, the pull of my phone, because they were starting to get into phones, and I was trying to be such a good role model by not being on my phone. And my eldest stopped coming up because I wouldn't let her take her phone to bed, and she was like 12. And his mother would let her, which is fine, but I could see she was online really late. And I was saying, it's hard enough for me as an adult who's lived without this, much of my life without phones and things, to resist its charms. And you've got to learn that moderation. And it's like they just can't now. And it's really sad. I don't know how we cut that dependency on that tech, because it's with them all the time. It's ubiquitous. Their work, their homework is online. We've lost that real community connection, which I think is another big part of what's going on with the boyosphere, the manosphere, is that these guys they're looking for a community. You can see how people end up in gangs. It's probably like one down from being in a gang, in that
Yeah.
they can latch onto that because they're so in need of somebody to give them attention and approval.
Yeah, absolutely. And you'll seek it anywhere. I mean, why wouldn't you, right? Because if you're not getting it in your community, you're not getting it in your home. But I don't see any way out of it unless we all start making some radical decisions that e- and even for having these conversations, I get called a trad wife or, stupid names like that. And I just think it's so ridiculous. Like the resistance to understand, hey, we've got to take some accountability for where society is at. And that's got to start at home. We've got to make some radical choices, you know?
Yeah.
And, for me, that's meant can't go on the overseas holiday and can't have this and that. And that's just got to be okay. Because that's not what the kids remember. The kids remember quality time with them, you know?
Yeah,
And
they do.
if
Yeah.
if we care about the next generation of kids, well, that's what it takes.
Yeah, the sacrifice. Back to your point,
Yeah.
however we go through our life, we've got to have pain and trauma to learn. I've been with my husband for 14 years and it's my longest relationship ever. And I love him now more than I did, of course, in the early days. But, in the early days, I would have been any transgression or away from me or, something I didn't like. And I'm not saying I would ever tolerate infidelity because I wouldn't. But you have this view. But actually, what has been the biggest joy in this relationship is navigating the times when you're not really that into each other. You are working hard and maybe like ships in the night, whatever it is, or you're just not connecting for whatever reason, and recognizing that and bringing it back. And that is the work of marriage. Shouldn't be awful and hard, but
Yeah.
it's about them seeing you at your absolute worst and still being there and you at your best, and that equal love and attention back to each other. That's what I've
Yeah.
learned. My husband has been my biggest teacher. Like I say, he has taught me such patience
Yeah.
because, he's a totally different person to me,
Yeah.
but he's
Yeah.
wonderful, but he's different.
Yeah. And I think that's the thing. It's like they are different. And that's been my biggest learning thing as well, because I think I went into a relationship expecting another female,
Mm,
like, in terms of how he behaves, how he responds to me. And then
yeah,
he's actually different. He's got different needs. He's wired differently. And actually to get still and to learn to appreciate that has been a big journey, and no one taught me this. I've had to, by hook or by crook, by listening to this, by reading this, it's like I've had to piece things together. But this isn't a mainstream conversation in terms of, hey, it really takes a lot of work and it matters, because you don't want to just keep moving from relationship to relationship, because you're still carrying you with you.
mm,
You're still carrying the same books. You're still carrying the same traumas. You're going to find it wherever you go. You may as well work on it where you are. And I'm not saying you stay in a really abusive relationship, but we've got to be honest about what it takes.
and let's leave this on a bit of hope for our listeners here. What is a more sane and measured conversation about how we get our information? I do think we're not reading. You said there you had to seek information, and I do. I go to source material. I watch long form videos, listen to long form podcasts, and then I'll go off and read. But I don't physically read as much the older I've get. I listen more to things.
Yeah.
What is the answer to this? Is it education? Is it role modeling? What can we all do, not just as women, all of us, to steer these boys and girls, because the femisphere, as you said, is a whole separate conversation. How can we start with this?
Yeah. Look, I think we need to be radically honest, about having these conversations, because they are tricky conversations. As women, we're not as good as you are with your closest girlfriends. You talk about the difficult times, but generally speaking, we put on a face. And so I think I absolutely believe in radical honesty and being truthful, because what I want is for girls and women, young women, to get the information that I never got, to understand that, hey, there's many sides to this coin. That doesn't mean that you need to be staying at home and working and just having the kids. That's not what we're saying. But let's have a more rounded conversation, understand the perspectives, and make your decisions more consciously, as opposed to what society tells you need to do. So I see a lot of hope, because a lot more women are talking about this. I'm having this conversation with you, and that gives me a lot of hope, because I think women of our age, it's like, you get to 50 and you realize actually you want to give back to society in a way. And this is what womanhood is. It's like you're alchemizing all the pain and the difficulties and the traumas, and actually giving back to society and sharing that wisdom. You look at ancient cultures, that's, they revere the matriarch,
Yeah.
and they got something wise and wonderful to give to the generation. So I hold a lot of hope, and I hope more women coming into mid-age will start talking about these things, start sharing those stories, because I'm talking to them, and you're hearing there are women who are dropping out of the workplace. Let's have honest conversations, because it matters, not to put women back into the 50s, but really to what is our next stage of evolution. We've kind of gone from, being in the home to suddenly doing everything that we want like men. Now, what's the next evolution? The next evolution is, what does it really look like to be the powerful feminine in the world? So I think those conversations are so important, and there's more women talking about it.
Well, that's something. Do you think that religion plays a role in this? I know lots of people are going back to church. I noticed on Manosphere, a couple of the guys had joined the Islamic faith.
Yeah.
Religion, and the community around that. Do you think that does have a role in this, or is that just each to their own?
Yeah, look, I mean, I think it will, because I think one of the things that these times are changing is we've for too long been focused on the material world, but there's an energy that animates the material, there's an energy that animates all of us. So the more we become aware of that, and faith is one mechanism to get in touch with that other part of ourselves. So I'm all for people discovering faith. I was brought up as a Hindu. I'm not, I'm a Hindu, but I believe in all religions, because I think they're all based on the same essential truth, that we're divine beings kind of playing out this material reality. So however people discover that, I think that's beautiful, and I celebrate that. So yes, more people going back to church and finding those communities, because those communities matter so much as well. And I think what faith gives you is a level of humility. It's suddenly realize it's not just all about me. There's something bigger playing out here.
Yeah, I think there is a thought, isn't there, that as we've been encouraged into that celebration of self, we've left behind those communities and the structures that help us through life. And, you think of the matriarch, if you were having problems in a relationship or a friendship, you'd have a big group of people to discuss it with and get a different view. You're just getting maybe a bit of TikTok or whatever, your own dark thoughts about friendships and relationships. So, yes, so there is hope out there. We're not accepting the black pill, Ragini. We need to create another pill, like a yellow pill, like the sun, something like that, and to bring us forward.
And this is what I say, someone might accept the black pill, but the black pill might be the mechanism for them to actually wake up, So sometimes it's the darkest and the worst choices that we make that actually wake us up. So I do have faith in the journey of life, that people that will all go through that, and that hopefully we come out the other end, a little bit wiser and grown up.
Yeah. That's the hope. Well, I certainly feel hopeful after speaking to you. I think you're an amazing thinker. If people do want to follow more of your work, where is the best place for them to go?
Oh, look, I'm still in the process of developing a website, but they can find me on LinkedIn for now. And yeah, like I said, I did have a Substack, but I don't. But yeah, on LinkedIn. Thank you so much, Penny. I really enjoyed I love these conversations. Let me say, I love talking to other women where we can have these conversations so freely. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much as well, because you're in Australia. So thank you for accommodating us time-wise.